Dr. Whitehurst Payne and myself present. Dr. Michael McQuarrie will be here shortly, and President Barrera is unable to attend today's LCAP meeting. If it would please the board, like to recommend that we have a very busy schedule today, that we take notes and save our questions for the end of each particular LCAP goal, if that's agreeable. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Superintendent Cindy Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Beiser. Whoa, that was louder than I thought. So last year we met at this time and looked at the plan for this year, and now we're looking forward to the plan for 17-18, our local control accountability plan, and casting the vision for next year about where we're heading in alignment with Vision 2020. So what you'll see today is staff and partners will be presenting the 5 key goal areas in terms of closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all, our commitment to access to a broad and challenging curriculum, family and community engagement with highly regarded neighborhood schools, our positive school environments, climate and culture with equity at the core and focusing on the whole child.
Point of order.
Yes.
I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda. Please vote. So motion carries. Continue.
I was wondering what you all were looking at because I just launched right in and you're all making eye contact. Did I miss something here? So to frame again, can we go to the first slide? Who has the clicker? Thank you. The visual on the first slide actually helps point the direction, and it's a compass because the LCAP truly is what guides us, and each of these areas, each of these 5 goal areas are what we're committed to as a district in terms of closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all, the access to a broad and challenging curriculum. That's what we'll be talking about first this morning. Second, we'll talk about access to a broad and challenging curriculum. Third, today we'll actually talk about family and community engagement. And when we speak about family and community engagement, we'll then move to positive school environment with equity at the core and support for the whole child. And then at the end of the day, we'll focus on quality leadership, teaching, and learning. What's different this year compared to our last year, these goals have been our goals. They're aligned to, we started with 12 quality school indicators a long time ago. Then the state had 8 state priorities. And over time, we've allowed our LCAP to be our guiding document for how we serve children with equity and excellence at the core. We have key areas of focus in terms of these goals, and specifically how we accomplish those goals next year is what we'll be discussing about today. But there's some broad themes about how we do our work as staff and how we meet the needs of our students. And some of the broad themes that you'll see throughout the day is that we're a district that believes that children learn best by doing. Learning by doing is at the core of how we implement things in the classroom, and we believe that knowing the whole child is important. It's not about a single test score. It's about knowing the whole child's social, emotional needs, academic needs, and the best teaching comes from knowing the whole child. We also do our work in a way that's connected to a belief system that it's not one individual, one board member, one superintendent, one area superintendent, one bus driver, one teacher that makes things happen. It's a collective response and a shared responsibility for the over 100,000 students that we serve. And in the context of shared responsibility and collective response, we work as a system to build capacity. So each and every educator, each and every individual in our organization shows up to serve children, and serving children along the methodology of we're going to build capacity, we're going to have a student-centered approach. We're a district that believes in student voice and empowerment. We've said many times, and this was led by the board, that this is a district that isn't only committed to producing test scores, but creating conditions where all students become actively literate, contributing, participating members of society who make a positive difference in the world. So that doesn't happen unless you focus on student voice and student empowerment underlying all of the work that we do. We've also focused on, in the last 4 years, on how to integrate services. We've talked about bringing down the silos, building capacity across the system, and how do we integrate services, and how do we calibrate what we're doing, how we're doing it across a large system, being the 8th largest district in the country. How do we have integrated services and calibrated services so no matter where you are in the district, you're getting equity and access across the system. We're focusing, continuing to focus this year on our reconnection efforts for all students to have ways to be supported in schools. And knowing the whole child, knowing what's meaningful and relevant to each student happens through our reconnection work. We also are doing it in the context of building community. The FACE department you'll hear from today, how do we build community around all of these big shared ideas? That it's not enough for staff to understand who we are and what we're about and how we're delivering, but how do we make that message across the whole community so there's broad community involvement and we're building community, and then everybody in the whole system understands that we're committed to unlocking the genius of each and every student, and we do it in a way that is strengths-based. So we look at, instead of what students' deficits may be or what they may be lacking, what are students' strengths? And how do we unlock the genius, access to strength, recognize the strength in their voice, in their culture, in their language, in their background, that everything our students bring to us are things that we see as gifts, and it's ours to meet students where they are. We are celebrating many great achievements. Of course, our graduation increase, the significant increase in college readiness courses that has happened over this past year as we continue on that path. We have measurable progress in gap closure. That's something that we have not spent a lot of time talking about, but it's pretty remarkable when you look at what we've done around these large efforts and these LCAP goals. We now have measurable gap closing progress in low-income ethnic groups, African American, specifically Latino, Hispanic students. And we have more students graduating with a seal of biliteracy as 4 key areas of what's been happening. So we continue now to strengthen and deepen the efforts that have produced these 4 things that I've just outlined. We have lots of opportunity as we build this LCAP. This is something we do in partnership with our communities, and there are many opportunities for parents, community stakeholder participation, starting from the beginning of the school year. Today's an opportunity. Last year we had over 1,000 comments on our LCAP goals. This year we're still compiling the comments. We're at 400 so far. We have parent input, cluster meetings, online surveys, and other opportunities, including today. And after today's input and feedback today, we're going to continue to refine. And the final reading, of course, of the LCAP will happen at budget adoption on June 27th. But we knew we needed a full-day workshop to outline where we're going for next year. So I want to break it down a little bit more. We talk about each of the goal areas, the first one being closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all. You're going to hear under each of these 5 goals, we're going to hear today from a specific school that's been highlighted as an example for delivering on that particular goal. It's the Quality Schools in Every Neighborhood Award. Dr. Evans calls it the CUSIN Award, his little acronym for it. But we're lifting up a school in each goal area today to talk about how they can help us build the vision for what it means to close the achievement gap or provide access to a broad and challenging curriculum, or each of these 5 goal areas. So we'll start with closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all, and we'll hear from Chesterton Elementary School, and they'll give us an example of what that has meant for their school, how they've achieved that, and what is underneath achieving that particular goal. Then you'll hear about the ways that we're going about closing the achievement gap next year with high expectations for all. We'll include our approaches around English learners and early literacy, our support for secondary students, and students with disabilities. We know in those 3 key areas that the way to close the achievement gap is to continue to focus on early learning, early literacy, English learners, supporting secondary students, and students with disabilities. Then we'll move in, this is before lunch, we'll do goal 1 and goal 2 before lunch. Goal 2, we'll talk about access to a broad and challenging curriculum, and we'll be featuring San Diego High International Studies and how they've achieved and are achieving that goal of access to a broad and challenging curriculum. And then we'll talk about our work next year in that goal area, which specifically will focus on VAPA. A broad and challenging curriculum includes an approach that has a strategic plan for visual and performing arts. And then we'll also talk about our approaches for learning by doing. How do we infuse learning by doing across the whole system with our makerspace movement and efforts that we're doing to broaden the curriculum and have learning be incredibly meaningful and relevant for students. We'll take then a break, and after lunch we'll focus on goal 5, which is our family and community engagement with highly regarded neighborhood schools, and we'll be featuring Rosa Parks as a school that will talk about how they've accomplished that and set a model for other schools to work on goal 5, family and community engagement. After we hear from the school, then we'll hear specifically how we plan to address that next year will be through meaningful engagement and participation of our families through our FACE department. So we'll hear Stan present on what does meaningful engagement and participation look like. You all set out over a year ago to say we want to increase parent involvement, and you didn't want to just increase parent workshops. You wanted to have meaningful, relevant, at the point of need parent engagement across the whole system and differentiate that engagement by cluster and by community so that it was going to be meaningful. So we'll hear about how the FACES department plans to continue and strengthen and deepen that work next year. And then you'll hear from Julie Martell and Marty and Maria about our district pathways, because remember, part of Goal 5 is highly regarded neighborhood schools, and our pathways, district pathways, help us respond to what our community is asking for and what our community needs, and learning about our magnet programs, and Maria Nichols talking about those specific pathways with Julie that we've been developing for students. So you'll hear that in Goal 5. Then we'll move to Goal 4, which is positive school environment with climate and culture. It's actually, when we talk about this goal, we just talk about positive school environment, but I always want to remember the whole goal is with equity at the core and support for the whole child. Goal 4 is a really robust and important goal. As much as we can focus on academics and leadership and learning and broad and challenging curriculum and closing the achievement gap and family engagement, you can do all that, but if we don't have equity at the core and support for the whole child, we're missing a large part of what it means to truly deliver on what we know is important for our students. So the school that we'll be featuring under positive environment with equity at the core and supports for the whole child will be Crown Point, as an example, and then we'll specifically focus on our restorative practices framework, our counseling efforts, and our belief system that every child needs a champion, and in order to unlock the genius, every child needs a champion, and what are we doing to make a systemic approach in terms of our counseling efforts under this goal. You'll also hear about our reconnection efforts and how our reconnection efforts are focused on attracting, retaining, and capturing our students to make sure that school is as meaningful and relevant to meet their educational learning needs. Under Goal 4, we'll also hear about our LGBTQIA efforts. We know that having students feel supported in friendly environments and the efforts that have happened up until now and how we'll deepen and strengthen those next year. And then finally, you'll hear about our health and wellness initiatives under Goal 4. And then we'll close out the day with what is actually the support for all of this is we're ending with Goal 3. At the end of the day, it's quality leadership, teaching, and learning. And we'll be featuring Marshall Middle School as an example. And specifically, you'll hear about how we have implemented or will be implementing our equity levers and our instructional priorities to strengthen Tier 1 instruction. We know at the heart all of this happens, but if Tier 1 instruction, the hours in the classroom every day with the teacher are of critical importance. So you'll hear about how we're strengthening Tier 1 instruction next year, what meaningful assessment looks like and how we'll continue to build for that, our sphere of success for students so that we can widen the sphere of success, more students will be engaged in participating, and then we'll talk about our high-quality IEPs and our multiple tier systems of support and why relational leadership is what surrounds all of this, and high-quality relational leadership inside coaching cycles is what allows us to make everything else work. So that's how we'll close out the day. And at the end of each session, I think Vice President Beiser talked about giving us feedback at the end of each goal area and comments as well. So we have full staff here. I want to say thank you to probably at least 80 people worked on pulling this together today, which is exactly what I said about this is about integration of services and collaboration. This wasn't one team. This wasn't one person sitting in an office putting together a document. This is the entire system being integrated and calibrated around how we're going to deliver equity and access with excellence to every single child next year. And so you see surrounding us here many staff members that have been part of putting this together, from finance to HR to the instructional team to all across the whole system. Everybody understands who we are and what we're about, and that's what makes a system strong, is a singularity of focus. And when you have a laser-like focus on what you're trying to accomplish, you get there faster and you get there in more meaningful ways for everybody involved. So with that, I think I still have the clicker and control of that. There's the user-friendly format of our LCAP. And I want Marty Stoles to talk about what our stakeholder engagement has been up until now and how we're still continuing to do that.
Thank you, Cindy. Cindy actually gave a little statement here a few minutes ago about our stakeholder engagement and how important it is to the district. I apologize for our alphabet soup of stakeholders, but everyone up there, every group is recognized. For brevity, we tried to put everyone on one slide, all the stakeholder groups. We do appreciate all of their comments. We do reach out to all of our stakeholder groups throughout the year. And we value everything that they tell us, and all the feedback that they give us is compiled. It's all synthesized and analyzed, and it goes to our instructional team. And the work that the instructional team decides to do going forward is based on a lot on stakeholder engagement, what the public is telling us that they want us to do going forward. And Cindy,
Oh, yes.
the engagement process actually is a year-long cycle. We start now with the adoption of the LCAP, so it's actually at the very bottom in June. But starting in September, we will be providing monthly board reports explaining some of the things that we're doing on each goal. Staff will present those to the board, and then the board has a chance to ask questions. That information is provided to the public. We post it on our website. We encourage members of the public to either watch the board meeting or read it later, provide us feedback on each of the goals as we go forward during the year. In January, our SBB process starts, which is our finance developing of the budget, and that includes stakeholder engagement at the site levels. In January, March, and May, the LCAP planning team meets and takes a look at where we are in the LCAP development, either in the implementation, how far we've come this far in the school year, or in March this year, we looked at the dashboard since that was new and had just come out. We let everyone know what that was going to be about. And then in May, the team starts looking at the early draft document. We put our early draft document out, and this was something we decided to do based on stakeholder feedback, that the public wanted to know what we were writing while we were writing it. So we put out what we call an early draft or a drafty draft document, so people can see where we're headed and provide us feedback as we're writing the document. The writing of the document is, again, a team effort, as Cindy said. Every department in the district is involved in some way in the LCAP, and we put it all together so that it's cohesive and it makes sense, and tells one story about where we're heading for the upcoming year. We do engage specifically with our DAC and DLAC because that is part of the LCAP legislation. We provide them with the early draft document, and they provide us with written feedback, and then we do have to respond to that. And at this point in the cycle, we have not yet received feedback from those two groups, but I'm sure it's coming anytime. And then we also have continuously available to all stakeholders our online survey, which is posted on the district website. So at any time, a stakeholder can go on to the survey and provide us feedback. It's in all languages so that we try to reach all of our constituent groups. And specifically during the month of May, we have a special survey which allows people to give us feedback on the draft document itself. So all of that, again, is compiled. We read it all. That informs us going forward. And that's how we develop the LCAP for the upcoming year.
Thank you, Marty. So we're going to launch right into LCAP Goal 1, closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all. And we will be featuring, as I said, one of our first schools to recognize, Chesterton Elementary School. Their slogan is Sprinting to Success, and we have Principal Akoni DeRidge here to talk to us about what this goal means for his school and how they believe they've achieved this goal and how others might replicate their success. You've heard me speak many times about how we take great practices and we want to replicate and take to scale. And so you'll hear Mr. DeRidge also talk about how he believes others could replicate that success and what equity levers they've used at their school to close the achievement gap with high expectations for all. So welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks being here. It's on. Okay. And the clicker is this one here. Okay. I'll try it. How's it going? Well, good morning, Superintendent Martin, board members, and members of the executive board, and guests. My name is Akoni Diraj, and I'm the proud principal of Chesterton Elementary, which is in the middle of Linda Vista in Chesterton Military Housing. So I'd like to give you a brief overview of our school. 56% of our students come from active duty military families, and 44% of our students choice into our school from the surrounding neighborhoods. Of the 100% students that we have from military families and neighborhood schools around the neighborhood, 60% of them qualify for free and reduced lunch. Therefore, we are a Title I school. 29% of our students are English language learners. They come from homes where 15 different languages are spoken, and 11% of our students come with individualized education plans that address their specific learning needs. With that said, we do service a diverse student population. So what does this goal mean for us? So I'd like to give you some context by showing this particular data. This particular graph shows that our English learners, as well as our students with disabilities, score comparatively above the district average. However, relative to the Chesterton population, they are still in the achievement gap. So if you look to the very left, the English learner group, I have 38% of students still not meeting or exceeding grade level standards. And of those, and making up that 38% is 19 of 50 English learners. 10 are nearly meeting and 9 are not meeting. To the right, we have students with disabilities. I have 75% of students, 15 out of the 20 make up the 75% with disabilities who are not meeting or exceeding grade level standards. I have 4 nearly meeting and 11 not meeting. And I break this down specifically because this particular data is the catalyst for all our work. And that's where I'd like to share our third slide as to then how did we achieve this goal and how might others replicate our success? By knowing each and every student that are not meeting and exceeding standards within these subgroups, our teachers are able to make sure that their Tier 1 instruction is also rigorous. And as we lift our students and support these students, we lift everyone as well. So what I believe that's attributed to achieving this goal is the first one, literacy implementation. We had to take a look at our schedules to make sure that we had all of our literacy approaches, meaning that we had to release the responsibility to our students, starting with explicit teaching, then going into a phase where we also have students try on the subject matter that they're teaching with the support of the teacher, and ultimately giving them enough time to independently try it on their own. Meaningful engagement. We had to make sure that within our collaborative conversations, which we focused in Learning Cycle 2, that we had purposeful partnerships for our English language learners as well as our students with disabilities, meaning that we had to strategically put them in partnerships that will allow them to have more opportunities to speak, as well as allow that when partners leave to get their service hours, they still have partners there for other students to talk with. In terms of meaningful assessments, our professional learning communities meet twice a month, and they look at common formative assessments which they develop based on the subject areas that they teach. Therefore, they are teaching the skills that students need to know at that particular 2-week cycle. And this is through the process of the continuous cycles of continuous improvement. They also work with our Tier 2 teachers to provide those interventions for reteaching, and then looking at data again to see what the baseline data, to see if there was improvement at the final test after the 2 weeks of reteaching. And finally, relational leadership. Relational leadership is really important at our particular site, not only for adults as well as students, because for the adults, we have to provide those systems instructors so that our instructional leadership team can talk about those difficult issues that, I don't want to make this generalization, but a lot of teachers and educators try to avoid because of the fact that it is difficult to deal with students that are struggling. They make excuses. They'll say, like, you know, they're coming from homes where families don't care because they're working too much, or the families are absent. They don't have the support at home. They have an IEP. So we put all those excuses aside and we face those difficult conversations. And we say the kids are coming to us, and this is an environment where we need to take them where they are and push them and give them the supports that they need to be successful. So in that particular structure of instructional leadership instructional leadership team and professional learning communities, we have those difficult conversations. In the classroom, we have intellectual communities where students take agency for their own learning and make sure that they know exactly what to do. The resources are provided for them in the classrooms so that they are successful. And so I think these four equity levers that I mentioned are attributed to achieving this particular goal. I know for our next steps, we're going to be looking at co-teaching so that our support staff can definitely plan strategic instruction based on individual needs called out in the IEPs for our students with disabilities, as well as moving our students that need to be more proficient in their oral language development. Thank you.
Thank you, Akoni. Appreciate having you lift this up as we are going to be building the prototypes for next year as more schools start to be recognized under each of the goal areas. So you're the first principal to come and talk to us about how you've achieved closing the achievement gap and the high expectations for all. People clapping for you, I think, quietly in the background.
Thank you. Very amazing work going on at your school. Thank you.
So now let's hear about how specifically, as we move into next school year, what are we going to focus on to close the achievement gap for high expectations for all? And we'll begin with early literacy and language development with Donna Marriott, Teresa Laskowski, and Sandra Cephas doing that presentation. Or maybe just Donna and Teresa.
Sandra's at Lincoln this morning for the International Center Showcase. So
Got it.
She sends her apologies, but we had to split ourselves. For that.
Okay, understood.
I think it's wonderful that she's actually at a school helping the kids.
I know, we were torn, so it's nice. We can tag team, yes.
Yes, our work is inspired by the board's promise, incredible promise to the children and families of San Diego that by the year 2020, every third grader, everyone, will read proficiently. This year's kindergarten children will be that class of third graders in 2020. So much of our work this year has focused supporting children and teachers in kindergarten. In the grand scheme of things, so I want you to see how we're conceptualizing this. We're going to continue with kindergarten next year because we still have work to do. But next year we're going to include our first grade children and teachers. The year after that we'll include our second grade children and teachers. And then the next year we'll include our third grade children and teachers. So we're following this year's kindergarten class all the way to third grade to help make good on this amazing promise. Our vision holds hands with your vision. We believe that all children can learn to read. I'll say that even stronger. All children must learn to read. We believe it is our individual and collective responsibility to make sure that happens, that all children learn to read well and on time. And we believe, and I know you do as well, that best first teaching is the linchpin here. We know that if we set children off at the end of kindergarten and first grade reading at grade level, they're set for success in all the years that follow. And children who don't meet those developmental reading goals have a very different experience in school. We know, the research confirms, that once children start slipping away from us, it's really hard to catch them back up. Best first teaching matters a lot. We're going to focus our work with you right now, mostly on student-centered coaching, which is a strategy that positions children at the heart of our work, and you're going to hear that reverberated across many presentations today. But I think it's important for you to see how student-centered coaching lives within a richer set of supports for our teachers. I'm going to look back for a moment to help us reach forward. So in our work this year, we reconceptualized all of our PD so that it is, first of all, a course of study. Reading process is hard. being an effective reading teacher is hard. The notion that we would come in for a one-day workshop and lift practice is unreasonable. So every one of these layers of support are courses of study. The other thing that we did this year, and based on the success we'll continue to do next year as well, is we put students at the center of all of this PD work. So we couldn't bring in real kids because they need to be in their classrooms, but we brought videos of kids and teaching to every one of these. So our study was wrapped around kids and teaching. We met with our transitional kindergarten teachers 4 times across the year. Our attendance was good. We had about 250 teachers attend those sessions. We also reached out to our preschool community, and we had monthly afternoons of study with them, and we focused on balanced literacy as a way to lift practice and smooth that transition from preschool into elementary school. We worked with about 100 teaching partners, where we took the special ed partner and the general ed partner, and they came together to a set of sessions so that we could help them support their students with IEPs learn to read. We worked with our principals in the course of the half-day principal conferences. Again, it was a course of study, and it was wrapped around children. And at the heart of all of this is our student-centered coaching model. That's where we have the potential to reach deep into the hearts of our children and our teachers. This year, we have 2.5 resource teachers, not very many, and we had to use them very strategically. With our 2.5 resource teachers, we were able to do coaching cycles at 11 schools, in addition to the work that I've just laid out for you. We worked with 50 teachers at those 11 schools, and we asked each of our teachers to identify on the very first day of our coaching work a child who is struggling, a child that they're worried about, a child who is not set up yet for success. We had 52 case study children. When we assessed them across the course of the year, I just want to share what I think is an amazing start to this work. When we assess student learning, and I want to tell you what we're looking at when we assess, we're assessing the number of reading strategies children independently deploy to read. So we're not so interested in how many letters do they know. We're not so interested in how many words they can read from a flashcard, but rather what are the strategic actions they bring to bear on text by themselves. When we counted up that data, 92% of the children we worked with, children who were not on the path to success, are now on the path to success. Our impact on teaching learning is also strong. 94% of the teachers we worked with showed improvement. And the way we counted that is we simply counted how many strategies did teachers notice, name, and teach. 94%. Pretty incredible with 2.5 resource teachers. And of course, we're not satisfied because we didn't hit 100%. So we have some revisions in our thinking for next year. We've done a lot of learning that will impact our thinking next year. We know that we have some work to do on with our teachers on reading strategies. What are the high leverage strategies? How do you know what strategies children are using and not using, confusing, neglecting? We know we have some work to do on balanced literacy. How do you leverage these strategies in a coherent, systematic way? We're going to continue our work on case study. The only measure that matters is, are we making a difference for kids, and particularly kids who are not yet on that path to success? We're going to continue with professional development that aligns with our coaching. So our coaching this year was nested inside of a bigger professional development plan, as you saw. And those teachers who experienced both layers, the professional days of study and the coaching, progressed the most. So that's a strategy we want to leverage next year. And we know we need more resource teachers. 2.5 people is not enough to change the course of an entire district.
So to give you a little bit of background on the work that we've done at OLA, some of our visions and values are the same, that we believe that every English learner can learn to read. despite where they are in their language level. We believe that we can provide supports and strategies for those students to learn to read. We believe that it is through a relentless focus on literacy and language that they will be able to do that, and that they will become proficient in listening, speaking, and reading. Is it this one to forward? So our work this year also focused on student-centered coaching. This was a step forward for us because we realized that the work that we had been doing had been centered on a teacher-centered model where you're working collaboratively with the teacher to change that practice. So there's a little step away from the students. So now that we're side by side with students alongside the teacher, there's moments where they're assessing and the students between the teacher, the student and the coach, and it's a beautiful way to see and collaborate and think about where students are, where their strengths are, where the standard is, and teach to the gap in between so that we can actually accelerate that momentum for students to read at grade level. So we believe that this work and our reflections is going to move us to shift in our thinking and our paradigms and to work keeping our eyes on students and the experience students have. It's going to keep us in a state of continuous question and inquiry. It's also going to deepen our work and understanding around designated and integrated ELD and a focus on language acquisition. So I think that it helps us narrow our focus and think about our professional learning, what we need to do, and what we also need to replicate for the district. So as Donna had mentioned earlier, our visions and goals are pretty much the same. So this is an opportunity for us to bridge together and bring our teams, not only grow her team, but extend our family at OLA. So we are bringing our teams together, and we're flattening, I think, our leadership style so that we can all be researchers at the table and figure out what kids need so that we can move them forward. We're truly excited, and we think that together great things will happen. So you will see on our next slide that we have representatives from early literacy and learning. We have OLA representatives and also a FACE representative. And this team of people will be called ELAs, and ELAs will go out to school sites to serve. We want to ensure that we represent the FACE team member, and we thought we could put fellas, but that wasn't so great. So we're going to keep with the name Ella.
Fellas.
Our theory of action. Our theory of, sorry, it's fighting me. Our theory of action is that with an expanded team and an added layer of expertise, we can reach more children, more teachers, and that we can cast a dual spotlight, not just on reading anymore, but reading and language as integrally related. You can't read without language. So we want to, and we've not left language behind, but we've not cast as bright a spotlight on it as we will be able to with an increased team. As we reimagine the work moving forward, we have more people. We can touch more children, more schools. We have this ability to help teachers see the relationship between reading and language. And we know that we have some learning to do in helping our teachers do some learning so that we are prepared to think strategically and help our teachers understand that relationship between language and literacy, understanding how we can assess language in really meaningful, formative ways. The current assessments that we have are not informative enough to let teachers know what they need to teach tomorrow in terms of language acquisition, complexity of language use. And as Teresa alluded to, we know we need to get smarter about designated ELD and integrated ELD. So those are more seamless, more meaningful, more engaging, and more authentic. Here are the set of tools we'll use as we merge our teams together. We know that we have work to do on raising the content knowledge of our teachers, the pedagogical skills of our teachers, and we're prepared to move forward on that. We have worked really hard this year on redefining assessment as an event to a process. If we want to know how children are reading, we need to listen to them read. If we want to know how children are writing, we have to watch them write and look at their writing. And if we want to know how children are using language, we have to listen to them talk. That's the assessment piece. But that's just the beginning, and that's not even the hard part of our work. The next step in this process is to analyze that data. What does it tell us about our kids? What do they control? What are they trying? What are they confusing? And only after that thorough analysis are we prepared to suggest what the next instructional steps might be. We're going to continue that work next year because we think that's really important. Intervention strategies are important. As soon as we see children slipping away from us, we've got to shore them up, and that's going to happen early. So we have done some, I think, important work around strategic interventions this year, and as we move to first grade next year, we're going to have to get even smarter about that. Leadership continues to be something that we're wrapping our minds around. We know that the role of the principal is essential before, during, in between, and after our coaching work. We've also been working on teacher leadership, but we know in the absence of the principal, this won't have the kind of traction that it really needs to have. So that's our set of tools. Next year, because we have more people, we can reconfigure the work a little bit. So we're going to continue to work on TK and K. That was our focus this year. But now in our coaching work, we're going to reach out to our preschool children and our grade 1 children. So we're doubling the participation rate. We're reconceptualizing the coaching structure. We've tried all kinds of structures this year: 3-week cycles, 4-week cycles, 6-week cycles, 8-week cycles. And we realize it's not the length of the cycle, but the recurrence of these cycles. So this year, this coming year, we're going to engage our schools in 4 learning cycles, coaching cycles across the year. We'll go in for 3 intensive weeks. We'll let teachers and principals practice that while we move to another set of schools. Then we'll come in for the next layer of coaching, and we'll continue to do that 4 times across the year. So it's a year-long coaching cycle at these schools. We're going to continue to focus on case study children because that's the measure of our work. If these children who are not yet on the path of success get back on the path, then we've been successful. Just a hint at the structure. The schools where we're going to coach, we're going to form those disparate schools into a unified network of learning, because we know we're not the only teachers in the room, that teachers can learn from each other as well. So we're going to gather up the entire network of teachers who will be coaching for some upfront work in the summer. There's some things we want teachers to know before they ever set up their classrooms. We want them to know the standards so very well. We want them to think about instructional schedules that make sense. We want them to think about room environments that make sense, and we want to do that up front. We have planned bi-monthly days of learning or retreats for our entire network because we're exploring some new territory, and we're all learners in this. And we're going to engage our principals in regular walkthroughs, and we believe that we have the capacity to whisper in their ear a bit to lift their skill set around early literacy.
We also know the importance of including our families and expanding our team of researchers to include our family members as well. So we will be engaging our families in 3 trainings around reading, writing, and speaking. As Donna mentioned, our goals, we believe, will be reached through the case study experience. And we believe that using alternative assessments, we're going to try assessments that actually measure oral language, that will give us insight as well as help us monitor the progress of our students as they begin to acquire language. We also believe that this process will deepen our experience and our learning so that we can begin to truly understand the integrated and designated to be into and from the content areas. And as Donna mentioned, to be meaningful and authentic. And we hope, it is our belief that we will have students reading at grade level on time each and every year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Great update around, when you started, Donna, you said the board had this beautiful goal and promise to the children of San Diego, reading on grade level by third grade, and that's the board's purview to set forth that vision, and now you hear how that's actually being accomplished and what it's actually going to take to accomplish that, and the integration of the services that you've just provided and the very specific data and metrics of the first year, what you've accomplished so far, now how to expand it and take it to scale is very helpful for us all to hear. So thank you for your presentation. We'll now move to our next subcategory, still under Goal 1, closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all. Another way that we will accomplish that in the year ahead is our support for secondary students to make sure that they have access to high-level coursework that will lead to a meaningful graduation. And we have Genevieve Clark here to present that.
Good morning, Superintendent Martin, Vice President Beiser, and Board Trustees. This is the first time I'm formally addressing the board, so thank you for the opportunity. I'm speaking on behalf of Executive Director Cheryl Hiblin, who is privileged to serve on a jury this morning, and the Office of Secondary Schools. So today I've been asked to present the secondary LCAP highlights from this year and our plans for the upcoming school year. I'd like to begin by highlighting some important data points that reflect how we moved towards closing our achievement gaps. Okay. So our overall graduation rate in 2016 increased from 89.4% to 91.2%, despite increased graduation standards. And what's even more exceptional, however, is the data that lives inside those figures. As you're aware, we've chosen to implement a UC A to G course sequence with the allowance of earning D grades in subject areas as long as the overall GPA remains a 2.0 or above. The remarkable data, however, is the increases we saw in UC A to G with C readiness, which is the readiness that reflects meeting UC admission requirements. In 2015-16, our overall UC A to G with C readiness rate grew from 53% to 59.6%, which was more than 6% growth, and our overall rate was higher than the county and state overall rates. In 2015-16, our African American UC A to G with the C readiness rate grew from 42.9% to 52.5%, which was more than 9% growth, and our overall rate was higher than the county and the state overall rates. Our Hispanic UC A to G with the C readiness rate grew from 43.9% to 51%, which was more than 7% growth, and our overall rate was higher than the county and state overall rates. Another piece of data that we are excited to share is our increased college course enrollment. In 14-15, we had 1,591 students in college course enrollment. In 2015-16, we had 2,228 students in college course enrollment. This is an increase of 637 students in 1 year. This year, we have 2,807 students in college course enrollment, which is an increase of 579 students. In order to continue our work to close the achievement gaps in 2017-18, we've identified 6 data-driven strategies. So, first, based on the gap between the number of students enrolled in AP courses and the number of students who have taken the AP test and the number of students who pass an AP test, we've worked with our college board reps to design an AP leaders cohort, which will allow us to identify AP teachers who have high enrollment and pass rates with students who live above and below the poverty line. With these teacher leaders, we hope to build cohorts of AP subject area teachers who can learn from and support one another. Based on our goal of increased meaningful graduation for all, we're working closely with our counseling resource team to design a K-12 comprehensive counseling guidance plan, which our team will describe in more detail in Goal 4. The important piece for Goal 1 is that this plan will ensure that close monitoring of student progress in academics, career, and life readiness are an essential part of each grade level support plan. In addition, partners like Reality Changers will help us identify and support 160 first-generation college students through the admission and retention process. Crawford, Hoover, Morse, San Diego High School, Lincoln, Kearney, Mission Bay, and Madison will receive this support in 2017-18. Another partnership that we're developing as part of this plan is an exciting new endeavor that we're creating with the Anti-Defamation League, and to ensure that non-discrimination is part of our life readiness goals for students at all grade levels. We're also inviting counselors to join us in the process of designing and developing the elements of this comprehensive plan. Based on our work on the ground at school sites, we know that engagement of our students is a critical element for increasing achievement. To support project-based learning at the team and department level, we're offering a 2-week project-based learning institute at Sarah High School, which will include expansion of our program by piloting middle and high school teacher combinations with sites including Pacific Beach Middle, Mission Bay, Marston, Claremont, Roosevelt Middle, and San Diego High School complexes. We're also planning to continue our support for site-based, project-based learning teams across the district and throughout the school year. We're also planning to support teachers and students through our Leaders of Innovation project. Interested teachers can self-identify and participate in monthly experiences to design project-based learning, design thinking, and other innovative experiences for their students in order to improve student engagement and learning outcomes. Teachers will have the opportunity to design and implement 2 innovative projects and measure the impact on student learning over the course of the year. In our Project-Based Learning Scholars Program, there's also an opportunity for students to self-identify and participate in the design of project-based learning experiences in conjunction with interdisciplinary teacher teams. Students will be paid through the San Diego Workforce Partnership as interns. To support ELA, math, and science teachers in the use of Marzano standards, proficiency scales, and next generation science standards, we're offering professional development opportunities throughout the year. Another professional development opportunity for next year will support PE first-time pass rates on the FitnessGram. Another important effort in supporting student achievement next year will be the expansion of our online learning program. Instead of the primary focus on online learning being credit recovery, we will work to allow the expansion and access of acceleration and advanced options at the high schools, and in some cases, the middle schools when appropriate. One point of clarification regarding rumors circulating about our online program. We use the UC A to G approved online curriculum through Edgenuity. While students may work on most of the curriculum virtually at school and home, our procedures require that tests are proctored live to ensure mastery of content occurs in real time. To state that our online curriculum is rampant with cheating would be like being concerned about who did a student's homework assignment. Sometimes students cut corners, but most of the times they do not. Our procedures require that they demonstrate mastery in real time and in front of our staff to make sure that they're demonstrating that they own the information. Finally, our careful monitoring of graduation and other data over the last few years has revealed that we will reach the point where graduation readiness will be affected by the consistent failure rates that we see between grades 7 and 10 specifically. It's important that we begin the discussion regarding grades and the ability for revision, redemption, and possibly a more competency-based approach. And we're hoping that this conversation can begin in 2017-18.
Thank you, Genevieve. Now we're going to move to the third way in which we close the achievement gap with high expectations for all, and it's our focus on students with disabilities. And Deanne Ragsdale and Lorelei Olson will be presenting how we address students with disabilities specifically so that they can also meet our learning targets and achieve graduation and have the supports they need as they get there, because high expectations for all is what we believe when we say we're closing the achievement gap. Deanne and Lorelei, thank you.
Thank you. So the goal 1 around students with disabilities is focused on improving outcomes and closing the achievement gap for students with disabilities. And when we look at that, we've taken the actions and put them into sort of 4 overarching areas. And these areas are all interrelated. They're not work that we would do in isolation of one another, but they're work that we do across our system as we collectively focus on outcomes for students with disabilities. And those 4 areas are supporting high-quality instruction, building capacity, student-focused structures and procedures, and high-quality programs. So we're going to address each of those for you and talk about them individually.
So I'll share first about supporting high-quality instruction. To improve the quality of instruction for students with disabilities, we need to do that wherever and whenever students are learning, all settings, all teachers, and all providers. Learning for most of our students with disabilities takes place in the general education setting. Under the leadership of a general education teacher. So where's the impact? We need to build capacity of our general education staff alongside their professional peers. This is where the integrated work truly matters. Area superintendents, principals, school teams, and central office staff, we need to work hand in hand to transform outcomes to close the achievement gap. The heart of this work is living in the student-centered coaching cycles where we can get the expertise of each coaching cycle member near children during live learning. The proficiency scales are a tool where we can depend on learning targets, progress monitoring of each student, high expectations, and adjusting instruction to student need on the spot. Students with disabilities cannot be an exception to this process. Our work then will be how we engage all of our educators to understand this new tool and to use it to assess our students' progress. As our job will be to support the implementation momentum of proficiency scales to build progress and success for our students. Sometimes, when a child has an IEP, students with disabilities can be excluded from these processes. Or it might be perceived to be okay because a student has an IEP to expect less. We can't allow that to happen. We need to flip it now into how each and every student will be provided supportive instruction using these tools. Tier 1 instruction in all settings with the implementation of high-quality IEPs. Again, this is where most of our students with disabilities spend the majority of their learning. In general education settings, this continues to be a focus area for all of us. We've clustered our students, as you know, who have moderate severe disabilities into cluster classroom models for the 17-18 school year so that we can provide high quality learning so that every one of our students with disabilities has the opportunity to learn and grow.
So the second area is building capacity, and I think that this is a really important umbrella for us because when learning takes place, it takes place because we've built the capacity of all of those who own the responsibility. And much like Lorelei just shared, one of the places where we really are going to focus on building capacity is through that student-centered coaching model, and that's through our work with all educators who work with students. But I think that one of the pieces we also want to highlight is that an important focus for us is in special education is professional development. And that's professional development for all of the providers who work with our students with disabilities. And that includes general education and special education teachers, related service providers, paraprofessionals, and our administrators. And one of our big focuses for next year is a leadership academy. We feel that it's very important to build the capacity of our administrative staff to make sure that we are focusing on their skills and abilities and knowledge to lead the quality work for our students with disabilities, both from an instructional lens, but also through the high-quality IEP and compliance lens. There are a lot of rules and regulations that come around special education, and we all know that that exists, but we believe very strongly in understanding the reasons behind those and understanding how to lead through quality with that and to lead so that we lead through the lens of understanding the purposes and the reasons why, so that we can focus on strong programs for students at schools. And the impact doesn't come from central office, it comes from that strong leadership happening at school sites. So we want to empower our leaders to really understand that. And the last bullet, I know that you heard from our community advisory chair about suspension and discipline data for students with disabilities. And you'll hear a little bit more about that through the Goal 4 area where it's targeted. But for our division's work, we feel very strongly that this is integrated work across our system. That our students that experience potentially more consequences and discipline, that we need to help build awareness, support, and tools across our system for helping to address this. So you'll see that through integrated multi-tiered systems of support, through the district's focus on restorative practices, through professional development, through behavior support resources and tools provided to sites. And we believe that our work in that is to be part of that integrated system and help build those tools and resources for our leaders. So again, under the umbrella of building capacity, we feel very strongly that that's one major role that we have, is building that knowledge and capacity for all those that work with students with disabilities to empower them to help create those strong programs.
Sorry. So when we talk about high quality programs, I'm actually going to start with the bottom bullet because it makes the most sense. When we talk about services for students with disabilities, we're always thinking about the continuum of service options. What do we have to provide services and supports to students so that they can be successful and achieve their hopes and dreams? The WestEd study, as you know, gave us some advice to look at our continuum of services and to really examine and review and consider if there is more we can do for our students. So when we're thinking about that, we really need to first look deeply at, are we meeting the needs of our students appropriately? From there, we need to look for and identify where we are not meeting the needs of students. This is also driven right now by a data point. We have high numbers of students attending non-public schools, and we need to address that as well because that's a symptom of a greater need to offer a broader continuum of services that appropriately meets the needs of our students with disabilities. And this work, of course, is bookended between early childhood education through graduation in all its forms. The next part I'm going to share about is our support for moderate severe cluster class implementation. I know you're aware of the changes we made to the moderate severe model for the 17-18 school year. We really needed to address classroom enrollments. We needed to look at students, are they learning in the least restrictive environment? This proved to be a difficult transition for some, and we are actively supporting and have been since we first shared this new model so that we arrived together and launched this successfully into the new school year. This is another priority for us. We need to build appropriate learning environments where robust learning, and we are committed to supporting logistically and instructionally for our students so all students across our continuum and at all levels can be successful and literate, numerate members of society that contribute heartily.
As Lorelei just mentioned, when we talk about our continuum of service options, we also need to look at kind of both ends of the spectrum. And again, I'll reference back to something you heard from our Community Advisory Committee a few weeks ago. But we have a particular focus on early childhood special education as we move forward. As we've broadened as a district our preschool for all, we've seen an influx both from other factors and from the fact that we're expanding our preschool services and preschool referrals. And so we're looking at how we increase our partnership with our early childhood education department to ensure that we have a full continuum of service options to serve our preschool children, our youngest and neediest children, because they're brand new learners. And we want to do just what you heard from Donna Marriott, which is get in there and get them early and get them ready and successful at an early intervention level. So we want to make sure we partner across all settings to make sure we have that full continuum of service options for all those kids at those levels. It can be a little tricky in early childhood education because you're dealing with different funding models and different ways to place children, but we have good partnerships that we're establishing and moving forward, and we're really excited about that. We also want to not just do from a service delivery model, but from an assessment model, look at how we improve that process for our families. Secondly, on the other end of the spectrum, it's graduation rates. And you just heard about our great success for our students in graduation rates. And we want to mirror that success for our students with disabilities, because although they are increasing their graduation rates just like their general education peers, the growth is not as high, the expectation level is not as high, and we want to get there. So we have developed a strong partnership with the Office of Secondary Schools. We're looking at their access to broad and challenging curriculum, to college and career coursework, and looking at how do we ensure those strong and successful transition plans for our students so that we can make those improvements necessary, again, so that we don't expect less than, so that we close that achievement gap or that opportunity gap for our students with disabilities and can focus on that for our students. So the final area for us is student-focused structures and procedures. Again, referencing back to the West Ed report, one of the themes that you would read in there is the need for clear procedures and structures and guidelines. And one of the things that I like to say about special education is that there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of procedures, and if we look at it over here, as a separate thing, it becomes this checkbox of compliance. In fact, I've heard people call it the IEP police, right? And so we think about all these things we have to do for kids because the law said so. And unfortunately, when we have that mindset, we separate these things that are in the law from what we're doing for children, and we see them as two very different things, but they're not different. The laws are designed to help protect and guide the rights of students and to help us design good programs for children. So what we want to do is really educate about the reasons these things are on an IEP, because each point on an IEP is there to help guide a discussion, is to help us understand how we build quality programs for children with disabilities. And when we understand the purpose behind them, we guide quality discussions, and we make sure that we have written a high-quality IEP that leads to high-quality instruction for students with disabilities. So instead of it being separate, it becomes the reason for. And it shifts our mindset from one of compliance to one of commitment. Because we understand the reason behind it, we use it as a tool to guide decisions that we make for kids, and then we understand how to implement that in the classroom. So instead of there being a compliance piece over here and an instruction piece over here, we see how they go together. And that is our big goal and our big push in capacity building and professional development and in procedures and structures for our district is helping build the mindset and the understanding of how these things come together. And so that every procedure, every training, everything that we do is focused on how we bring the data together and what it's telling us about children, and how then we make decisions about what to do to support the needs of children, so that we're following through on that commitment about making sure students get what they need and when they need it and how they need it. And that's for every child. And so I think that my main point about student-focused structures and procedures is that we want our procedures and guidelines and things coming out of our office to not be something I have to do so that somebody at the district or somebody at the California Department of Education is happy, to something we do so that we ensure students get what they need. And that is our next big focus on ensuring that we help close the achievement gap for students with disabilities.
You're not at all passionate about this, are you?
Not at all. Yeah.
Seeing your work integrated with the entire instructional team shows me the way forward about in true integration and what that means. I appreciate the presentation and helping folks understand the how we're actually going to accomplish this. And high-quality IEPs are something that we can say, but to actually deliver on that and work with the whole instructional team and watch that work unfold is critical to the next phase of our work. So appreciate the presentation. So that includes staff's presentation and the example of the school that we held up, Chesterton, by Mr. DeRidge, and then specifically how we're focusing on early literacy, English learners, support for our secondary students, giving them high-level coursework, and students with disabilities as three key levers that we'll use to close the achievement gap with high expectations for all in the year ahead. So with that, we're actually ahead of schedule. We can move to public comment and board comment.
All right, thank you very much, Superintendent Martin, and everybody that presented so far on LCAP goal number 1. Let's go ahead and take some comments from the public, and then we'll go ahead and take questions or comments from the board. Let's go ahead and start. We have also, if you're here today and you'd like to comment or speak at the end of each of the LCAP goals, please fill out a community speaker slip, and please turn it in to Board Action Officer Cheryl Ward. She's seated at the end right over there. All right, let's go ahead and begin on LCAP goal number 1. We have Amy Redding. You have 3 minutes.
Amy Redding, the chair of Kearney Neighborhood Schools, is who I'm here representing. The needs for the Kearney cluster based on the survey information provided by Ron Rohde's office. Thank you. No Spanish at Montgomery this year, not A through G friendly. I hear that'll be fixed for 2017-2018 school year. More district support for explicit phonics instructions. As for ELs, district support for an aligned literacy curriculum at all levels. Elementary schools in the cluster feel left out. Need more ways to cognitively engage all students at all levels with daily instruction. Need up-to-date curriculum that emphasizes critical thinking, not just Common Core standards. More time is needed to understand how programs can assist students and how data can be used to serve students. As far as what Kearney thinks is working, love the Lucy Calkins co-teaching for ALD. This guarantees implementation in the classroom. Intervention supports Tier 2, built into the school day for all grades. Math and literacy supports, such as before and after school tutoring and technology programs, have been instrumental in student growth. These are purchased with site funds. This is why site funds are so important. And we're excited about the expanded eligibility for pre-K programs, but please keep the needs of families in mind when setting hours and programs.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Oswald, you have 3 minutes. Good job,
Amy. My name is Bill Oswald, and I'm here speaking with the Parent-Student Resident Organization and their partners out of the Hoover and Crawford clusters. You want to hand out the material? The stuff? I think some of you got this stuff, but we have a document which we want to share with you that has recommendations from the community interspersed throughout it. Some of you know this, but back in March, the PSRO and their partners in Hoover organized the parent community dialogue and education where approximately over 140 parents, students, and residents came. Dr. Whitehurst Payne and Dr. McCurry were also there. And so what we want you to know is what's in this document comes out of 3 months of dialogue in the community, small workshops, small discussion groups, one-on-one meetings. It all led up to the March 25th meeting, where residents looked at the outcomes within their area 6, and then answered questions as to why do these disparities exist, what do we think as parents and students that need to happen, and what would we like to see the district do next year to address these issues. So I believe you have report from that. You also, the district last year put a SIFE committee in its LCAP, which was supposed to be the district and parents and community residents to meet to talk about developing best practices for dealing with students with interrupted formal education. That committee formed. It met 6 times, 3 times without the district. And so the report that you have comes from the parents, not from the district. So the committee has has not done that, but it has specific recommendations. So the other, one other thing I would say in broad, because as opposed to going into details, is one of the things that's clear to us through this process is that the Crawford and Hoover clusters are not like other clusters. There may be some clusters like them, but they're not like other clusters. Out of the 14 some thousand students, 7,300 of them are English language learners. If you look at the elementary schools, something like 10 out of the 18 elementary schools have more than 2/3 of their students are English language learners, which would tell you no matter what that student is in that district, at least 2/3 of them are going home to a non-English speaking home. Out of that 7,300 plus English language learners, about 2,000 to 3,000 of them, it's hard to estimate given the way data is collected, are refugee students, or what we think are probably SIFE students, students with interrupted formal education. That's 2,000 to 3,000 within the Crawford and Hoover clusters alone. We also know from our community work that there are also such students at Lincoln, in the Lincoln cluster, and the San Diego cluster, and others. And that the district receives 400 to 600 of these students each year. And so essentially what we're asking the district to recognize is that traditional and typical ways of school districts reaching out to communities will not work in this community. We need to be able to work in the community, help the community understand why they're being called to meetings, what those meetings are about, and the district has to get better at making them welcoming by providing the translation and interpretation that they need. So again, there's lots of different
Thank you.
recommendations. And so,
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, Dan Namayaga. You have 3 minutes. How do you pronounce your name again? Namanga? Namanga? Yes. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm from Danyamanga with the San Diego. I work at Crawford cluster and Hoover cluster community. And as Bill has said, we took, as a community, we took seriously when the district say we're going to do community engagement, and we take that very seriously. And that's why, as a community, we took, as a community, we took the initiative to make sure that all our diverse community and parents and families have a platform where they can be able to freely express their dreams of having their children achieve the best education they can do. And that's why we had, for the last 10 months, we engaged ourselves and reached out to our district partners in order to effectively have a meaningful community schools. And so, so we have 2 reports that we already submitted, and we have been engaging the district for the last 10 months. And the questions that we wanted to ask today was, of all the district departments that engaged and interacted with the community members, all the district staff that engaged and interacted with the community members, what is it that you as a department or as a district proposed to this year's LCAP that reflect that engagement? We sat down with the parents and looked at this year's LCAP and compared the notes and minutes of since we started engaging with the district. We did not find any single thing that reflect that engagement. And so it made us ask a question, is the district serious about engaging the community if a district department can propose something after that does not even reflect the engagement of the community around education for the last 1 year? So that's a question to the district. If you can tell me a single paragraph or a single full stop or a comma that reflect that engagement, we'll be so happy and thank you. But it doesn't exist as per now. That's why we send you the 2 reports. That with the recommendation, we tried really to make sure that the recommendations are matched up to the LCAP goals. And we also looked at the current proposal and gave you a recommendation, the language that we like as a community to be reflected in that. And what else? And also on that note, I also want to, if you have the last year's LCAP, not this year, not the draftee, and you looked at the 1.18 and then 9 with the Office of Language Acquisition, with the board approved a document that says formation of a SAIF committee, which involved the district and the parents and the students and the teachers to look at the issues that affect the SAIF students. And then look at the draftee and what they all are proposed to be in the draftee. And then you don't see any mention of the 10 months of the community work, even in that draft, in that language. We also gave a recommendation on what can be done to effectively, to affect that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. That concludes public speakers. Are there any other, Cheryl? Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions or comments?
Mr. Beiser.
Dr. Evans?
Just a point of how we could proceed. I was wondering, when we have these questions and comments, if we could have the people from this goal up here to answer our questions, so that everybody that in this previous presentation, if they could sit up here.
Okay.
It would
Sure.
make it easier than yelling out to the audience.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, so all the staff members that were a part of the LCAP 1 presentation, if there's sufficient seats, please go ahead and have a seat up here, and maybe if there's extra staff members in the second row behind them.
Thanks.
Thank you, that's a great
Sandra,
suggestion,
you're
John.
back. Thank you. We know you're doing great work at Lincoln this morning, and your team represented the work very well. We know we had to clone your department today.
Okay, who would like to begin?
Did
Dr. Evans?
Coney leave? Did Mr. Derish already leave?
Yeah, he probably
Yeah,
went
he had
back to
get
his school.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
to continue the great results of student
I
learning.
was thinking, Dr. Evans, you might be trying to ask him some questions.
Yeah, I mean, I do appreciate the fact that we're hearing from specific schools.
Yeah.
Which we had said before, we want to keep going back between what's happening at a particular school
Yeah.
and then what's happening across the district. So the first thing I want to obviously mention the great work that's going on in the K-3 literacy. That it's a really big goal to say that we want to have all of our students, proficient readers by third grade. I think it's the same thing we did with the UC A-G when we said by the year 2016 we wanted to have the students, at that level, and I think we're doing the same thing here. It's very ambitious. So I have some specific questions related to this, and I'll kind of go through these really quickly. One issue is in terms of the, let me just start in order here. By the year 2020, all third grade students will read proficiently. What do we know at the end of 2016-17 right now about where our kindergarten students are at in terms of literacy? I mean, I don't know if you have data yet or as far as across the district about how we're doing on that.
I can't comment specifically on kindergarten, but what I can comment on is the student-centered coaching cycles that are focused on second grade. So we have been collecting data, and what we've noticed is there is discrepancies in interpretation and in the way we might look at students. So this has been an opportunity for us to calibrate and truly understand what students are capable of doing. So looking away from accuracy rate, so to speak, and thinking about comprehension both in the text and beyond the text. So I think that's something we can see across the board. Donna, you might
And
want
if you
to-
go back to the slide where the work that Donna's doing specifically, she talked about reading behaviors and how they're monitoring teacher change in practice and looking at student reading behaviors. So whoever has the clicker, if you can go back to that slide, that's specifically what Donna's monitoring and supporting change in practice and Tier 1 instruction and building literacy and 95% and 94%.
13.
I was remembering the numbers from the top of my head, but that's what Donna was reporting on because it's really change in practice that's going to change the outcome that you're talking about, Dr. Evans. Who monitors the outcomes you're talking about are the area superintendents sitting back there. So one more slide back. So she's looking at impact on student learning, 92%, impact on teacher learning, 94%. These are the case studies. These are the coaches. This is the impact that they have. And when you push on those levers, then you get the lagging indicator, the reading score that you're talking about. That changes only if and only when those things change. And so that when Donna looked at you, she's not monitoring that. It's the area superintendents that monitor that work. And so we can get that data for you.
Which schools are we talking about?
In this,
Which schools were you working at, Donna?
See if I can just pull them out of my head. Hamilton, I'm looking to my team that's sitting there. Central, Marshall. Could you just stand up and say it?
Marshall, Hamilton, Central, Dewey, Hardy, Florence, Sequoia, Porter, Sauk, and Mason.
Talk about testing on the spot. And then the specific rates at each of those schools, we can get those for you if you'd like from the
Okay.
area superintendents.
And so, another question I just forgot right now, but in terms of, let me just go through this. Well, it had to do with we have this limited group we've been working with, and there's a limited number of coaches, so I understand the limited impact it has across the district. But I'm wondering what is being done to share with everybody what's happening in these particular places. I mean, it seems, and again, it seems to me that there could be all kinds of videos and information where the students, the teachers at the other 100 schools would be able to see what's happening at these schools as a model. I mean, I don't know how well developed we are yet for just having this constant sharing across the district.
And what we wanted to see this year is their impact. Can we do what we're doing and have 2.5 coaches impact 50 teachers? And what we found is unequivocally yes. So now how do we expand that and take that to scale in the plans? I don't know if you're ready to talk about that yet, Donna?
Well, and what I'm saying is I realize it would be good to go from, if this is very effective, to go from 2.5 coaches to go to 25 coaches.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying in the absence of that, budget-wise or otherwise,
Other ways for
are there
sharing,
ways to
yeah.
share that information that can get out to all the
That's
teachers
part of
who
the
are interested?
advantage of capacity building as a core foundation of what we're doing, and sustainability, the way that we're being an integrated system. All of the work that Donna and her team does, we do a day of learning, we call it, where we're able to teach one another what we're doing, what's worked, and the area superintendents who work obviously with supporting the schools and the principals directly. This work isn't happening in isolation. When the advantage of silos being broken down and teams working across divisions is how we spread a little bit more, and I think Donna wants to make a comment.
Yes, in addition to that rich array of professional development, which reaches way beyond the schools that we touched with our coaching, we have developed no less than 15 Rely modules where teachers can learn more about effective reading instruction. And they include videos of teaching and videos of children learning. In addition to that, we have embarked on a very ambitious project this year where we have identified the high leverage strategies that children need to know and teachers need to teach for across kindergarten. And we'll continue to do that work next year with first grade and second grade so that every teacher in the district will have access to that very important knowledge and resource.
Okay, good. And when you mentioned about professional development, a couple of things were mentioned in different points about some professional learning over the summer. How does that happen? Is that voluntary? Is that something that's required? I don't know just how that works.
Who's ready to address that question? The summer learning.
We'll use the word nudge. We'd like to
Okay.
nudge teachers to attend. We can't
So you're offering the
compel them.
opportunity.
That's correct.
Okay, that's good. And you mentioned on language acquisition about early reclassification, and we made a shift in terms of the whole reclassification process and the change with ELSTs and so forth. So, and I think we saw last year some statistics on the improvement in the reclassification rate. Do we have? First of all, how is it being done at this point, logistically, and what are the results for this year?
We are still in that window, so we don't have all the numbers, but last time because we keep track, and so on the board we had approximately, I believe it was 3,700 students, no, I'm sorry, 3,200, right? 3,200 students that were reclassified as of last week. So we are pretty much, we probably will reach the same amount of students this year as we did last year. Last year we reclassified 4,000 students approximately. But they didn't all make it before the deadline. There is a deadline of June 30th, so we'll see how many of them get into that deadline. But and we're using the same process. So we We created the e-profile, so the reclassification profile is now being sent to the principals. So that's already, has the CELT scores, and we have the SBAC score, then SBAC scores are included, and so that has been streamlined, and we're using the same process that we used last year.
And one statistic we had was about the number, and this will go down more slowly, but the number of long-term English learners, has that continued to go down?
It has continued to go down. We don't have the numbers, so the last new data that we received was from the state when they pulled our long-term English learners on Census Day. On Census Day, it was 3,200 students. But remember, our numbers are a little bit higher for two reasons. Our long-term English learner numbers, we continue to, in other words, the Census Day is just one snapshot on that day. We continue to count as students become long-term English learners, depending on how long they've been in the school system. Because the moment that they have been in the school system for more than 6 years, we count them. Now, the state also doesn't count them as long-term English learners if they have gained one year's worth of on the CELT, so one band, and so that's why the numbers are slightly lower at the state level, but it's approximately, it's pretty close. It's 3,200 students according to the state.
Okay, thank you. And this, back to the K-3 literacy, when we're keeping track over these 4 years, it would be helpful if we could have a couple of things. One is where all the kids are at in 3rd grade, but we know that some kids are going to come into the district at 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade. And it would also be interesting to have a separate statistic on the students who went all the way through, in terms of to see the effectiveness of the program. Because, if a student just came in at 3rd grade, we're still going to try to get them up to speed, but I think it would better show our results if we're showing.
If we keep it by cohort,
the
kids that
cohorts.
start with us.
Yeah. I mean, I know we get into all the trickiness of, cohorts as far as high school because of kids coming in and out, but then the same thing is true in K-3. And here's a very basic question that no one would raise their hand to ask, but what is balanced literacy?
So balanced literacy
Donna's
is
ready for that one.
It is like that.
It is our district framework for teaching children to be independent readers, and it has component pieces that move from explicit instruction to co-created or co-constructed experiences to independence. So these words you've heard before: read aloud, shared reading, guided reading, and independent reading.
Okay.
And I think our teachers largely know those approaches. The nuance that we feel compelled to do some teaching around is integrating those, so that as you take a concept or strategy and you nudge it through all of those levels of support. So we're not teaching different things in each of those contexts. We're teaching the same thing across all 4 contexts. So sometimes our teachers think that shared reading is the time in the day, and it's not tightly connected to the read aloud or tightly connected to guided reading, which are the levels of support on either side. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
That helps.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a thing that constantly comes up from parents when you have kids at different levels. There's always a concern, I don't necessarily agree with it, but that when you're looking at all of the kids who are falling behind, that some kids the idea is that they're going to be sort of treading water, waiting for the other kids to catch up. So could you just say a little bit about what goes on in terms of making sure that the higher achieving students are continuing to accelerate their learning, or why that happens or doesn't happen? I mean, I know it's the whole issue of differentiated instruction, but
Yeah. So in our whole group instruction, we are lifting the learning of every child, and we are very mindful of children who might be struggling, who are on track, and children who are accelerating. So it's incumbent on us to make sure we know exactly where our learners are so that we can nudge them to their next place of learning. Just as important as our whole group context would be our small group differentiated context, where we can take a group of very capable readers and nudge them to their next place, and also work with our more struggling kids right at their point of need. So balanced literacy is more than just those 4 components that I talked about, because there are components within each of those components. For example, I can do shared reading with my whole class, but I can do a repeated shared reading with kids at various levels of need.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it would be helpful when we talk about being proficient by 3rd grade, that we also have some information on those who have accelerated much beyond that. I can't tell you how many parents have come into my office and said, my kid's in 3rd grade, but he's reading at 9th grade level, and on and on. People always talk about that. I know the buzzer's probably about to go off for me, but just one,
I don't
couple
think
more.
Ms. Ward started it for you.
Couple more
It's a
questions.
workshop.
Dr. Evans, you're asking a lot of questions I'm sure that other trustees had.
Okay, well then I'll go last next time. One of the things I want to say about the graduation rates and so forth, and all of the statistics, even as could be the smarter balance and everything else, is that we really we talk about the number of students that have been included, because when we're looking at going from 53 to 59% or something like that, that sounds very incremental. But if you had, 5,000 students and now you have 5,800 students or whatever, I mean, I think you can see that more clearly. One of the metrics in terms of the UC A to G, I think you went from last year to this year, but I know when we went back a few years, it was almost a 50% increase, not percentage points, but in the number of students who are actually, and that's sort of hidden in this in terms of, the greater number of students who are actually meeting that requirement. And then the issue about non-public school in participation with the students with disabilities. I'm wondering, just like we do with the high school innovation centers, how, first of all, I understand not preventing some of the problems in the first place, so that it leads to that. But I'm also wondering to what extent we could even have more in-house kind of programs in terms of what some of the non-public schools are doing. I know there are going to be some really severe isolated cases that there just would not be the volume to deal with in the district, but it seems like we could look at both from prevention and also from remediation doing more in-house. What are your thoughts about that?
So when we address looking at our continuum of service options, that's exactly what we're talking about, is if we have a large portion, and we do, of students who are having to be served outside of the district, what is the reason? Certainly there's prevention and then there's response. And so if there's a reason that we're not serving these students within the district, what is the need that we are not being able to address? And how do we look at either existing programs that we have? For many of these students, we're talking about secondary level students. So we've had these conversations already with our secondary school office about what other programs do we have and how do we access and leverage some of those opportunities for students with disabilities. How do we build additional supports in? So can we, in fact, create, modify, or adapt programs that we have so that we have increased access for students with disabilities? So that is absolutely something that's on our radar that we're looking towards. We've got to kind of identify what the needs are and then see what it is that we need to do to try to meet those needs best for our children.
Great, thank you. One more question for the superintendent. In terms of the Preschool for All, do you have information on how many more students we have in district preschools this year compared to last year?
We do have that information, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay.
But we can get that for you.
Do you think it's been
An increase, yeah.
significant
I'm
increase?
looking to Jim and Stephanie are over here, but we have made increases.
Okay, good.
All right, Dr. Whitehurst-Payne, we have just a time check. We have 12 minutes to stay on schedule.
Well, just a couple of things I'll touch on, because thank you, Dr. Evans, you did touch on a lot of them. But to return to page 13, where we still are,
That's the early literacy slide.
Yes. Just in terms of the sheer numbers for the schools, I noted that a lot of them were in center city, mid-city. And hopefully we've gotten all of the elements from all the outlying schools so that, you kind of want to do a sample around. I'm not sure how those schools were chosen. For example, I know at a school like Bethune, they're concerned about their children in literacy and them being able to understand that. And I don't know that we've necessarily gotten a group of students with Tagalog, Filipino language, and the concerns that the parents have in that community versus in mid-city. And just ensuring overall that we just kind of sample everybody so that those strategies go across the district. I I guess overall too, my question centered around when you want to expand, because we're looking at 2.5 coaches trying to do this work, and now we want to scale it up, and hopefully, no, okay, you're up, okay, good, very good, because that's a big concern. And I'll just skip to my, the point that I wanted to park on, which is the special education. And I was fascinated by your comment that we want to move from compliance to commitment. And I think that's commendable, because one of the things we have to look at is the fact that teachers are in the classroom with special education students, English language learning students. I mean, we have not just SPED in isolation or EL students in isolation. The teachers, the general ed teachers, are dealing with everybody. And it's good for the central office folks who are going out to support the schools to recognize that if the special education teacher is asking the teacher to do something, that has to be in the context of who else is in the classroom. And so to be a part of that support system as a team and to recognize what's going on is very good. So I commend you for that. And I don't know how you get beyond this, but teachers need to understand that IEPs are not just something for us to say, oh, we did that IEP and it's checked off and so on. But it actually is a document which I believe every child should have, an individual plan, so that you are meeting those needs of that particular child or those children. And if it's not working, then the team needs to come back together to say, there's something wrong with this plan. We need to help this child to be successful in this context. And if it means whoever is on the team are not even there to ensure that those children are being successful in that process. And I think I'm talking to the choir. You understand? That's good. But that was something that really, you're talking about a major paradigm shift. And, it's like you've got to change the Titanic or something to, okay, very good. I will stop there. And if something
May I just clarify one thing before we go to the next comment? When Donna Marriott talked about 8 more literacy teachers, I wanted to make it clear that we weren't adding new people, it's existing staff. We were combining some teams and existing staff that we already have, focusing their effort on this. It's not additional staff.
Dr. McQuarrie?
Cool. So Trustee Evans picked up a number of my questions, and they were answered, and I appreciate that. Also want to thank the panel and the presentations that you have made. I want to continue on the Trustee Whitehurst-Payne's comment on going from compliance to commitment, how we need to move from one space to another. I want to carry that into also moving from myth to reality. And it seems like that was sort of a common theme throughout. If we really want to close the achievement gap, we have to shatter some of these myths that provide excuses, some of the myths that establish low expectations, some of the myths that you don't look like the kind of kids who should be in this particular program. So I think it goes all the way from early childhood all the way through college and preparation. So I just want to commend you for making the effort to moving us from myth to reality. Doing that requires what has been mentioned frequently is training, staff development, professional learning events with our teachers, with our principals, and with our parents. The group I didn't hear mentioned frequently and only within the children with disability presentation is the training that needs to take place with our classified. I think our entire classified needs to be involved in the process, and I'd like to see more of an effort to ensure that when students arrive at school, they hit the office, it's those expectations and the people they meet there. It's that school bus driver, it's police and security on campus. It's the entire team. So I just didn't quite hear enough on closing the achievement gap and what other people besides principals and teachers can do. Also want to emphasize the
Dr. Mike, Deanne did include paraprofessionals in her whole plan. I don't know if she didn't say it, but she said, okay, it is part of the plan.
Yeah, I did hear paraprofessionals. and want to commend the parents and in our clusters and the effort that they're making to engage in that process and in ways that we can expand on their engagement, their education, their effort to move from passion to expertise, and to move from a single item of concern or effort to maybe a more global effort. And as we can enroll and engage our parents, I think it's definitely helps the whole school-wide effort in terms of closing the achievement gap. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you again to, a lot of my questions were, Dr. Wetterspain.
Just one other point. I think that the Crawford-Hoover cluster has done a lot of work. Both Mike and I attended one of their sessions on a Saturday, and I believe that was the beginning of a vacation or something, and that's why we did not have a lot of school people there, and hopefully we can work through that the next time so that folks are there when the community came out in large numbers to, I thought it was an excellent group, and they brought forth their concerns, and hopefully I'd like to see some of them addressed.
We actually have a summary of every single one of their points from that day, and we have it listed by LCAP goal. We have about 10 points that we've learned from them, and we can point specifically, so I'll have staff meet with them to show them exactly where their feedback from that day is in our 17-18 LCAP. We have it broken down by goal.
If I could just add to that, it's one thing to get input. I think it's another thing to act on the input we get. And I'd like, so I think it'd be important for us to take the suggestions and the comments and the concerns that are coming through our various advisory groups and to our parents and our community partners to ensure that they hear where their suggestions have gone, know which have been implemented and which haven't, so they can understand the reasons why. And I know what priorities are an issue, and funding is an issue. We can only do so much, but I think it's important that we make it a 360 go-around. We receive as well as provide feedback.
Well, and we do more than just read the input. We actually take the input and incorporate them specifically into the LCAP and can point exactly where it is if any group would like to ask. And we'll meet with folks to show them. Sorry, Vice President Beiser, I know you're ready to go with your questions.
No, that's all right. First of all, I just would like to provide to everybody here, where did these original LCAP goals come from? They were not created by the staff at all. In fact, back when we began the process of local control accountability planning, we convened meetings around the district in different schools, and parents, teachers, students, and community members came together with a blank slate and wrote down what they wanted to be our goals underneath each plan subsection as articulated by state law. And so when, Mr. Dan Namanga is asking for where specifically are the parent and the community members' ideas, every word of the LCAP came from the community, the parents, the students, and the teachers that attended these initial drafting meetings. And then every year, we augment that or update it based upon additional input from community members, teachers, and students. And that goes into my first question, which is from slide number 5, where we're talking about a survey and that the survey is available on the website. But a lot of people don't necessarily go to the website thinking there's a survey there. And so my question is, was there any distribution efforts of the survey? And then what's our completion percent per the population, parent population, staff population, student population?
Marty and Ron can address that question. You didn't think you had to come up here, Ron.
It would be very difficult to try to calculate a response percentage because the way the survey works in many cases, that groups of people sit down at a cluster meeting, for example, and there might be 5 or 6 people at that table, and they discuss certain parts of the LCAP, and then they submit a single response for their entire group. And that happened at our 16 different clusters, and so we don't have an individual count of how many different people have responded. And we've also announced that the survey is available at all of those different types of meetings, at our advisory group meetings throughout the year. So we tried to make sure that people are aware that that online survey was available. And it also, they could have submitted via an email address, lcap@sandy.net, which is still available for people who can continue to submit responses.
Did we push out a link to the survey to all the stakeholders, the parents and the staff members in the district?
Yes, we made that available to all of the cluster.
But did we push it out, like in an email to all the staff members and all the parents?
I'm not sure that we sent an individual email to our
Stakeholders?
individual parents.
Okay. And then in the survey, is one of the questions basically trying to identify the survey taker? For example, I am a teacher, staff member, parent, student.
Yes, we asked people to state their affiliation, so
Okay.
it's whatever of those groups they belong to.
Okay. And then how many surveys were responded? Given I understand that, you know, some groups may have submitted one, but how many total numbers of input did we receive this cycle?
We had probably about 400 or so with actual responses. We had a number of window shoppers who just went in and clicked into the survey just to see what was there, but didn't provide any data. So I'm still, we just closed it yesterday, and so I'm still compiling the results, but we had two different surveys, one that was open all year long, and then a separate one that was just for the month of May to get cluster feedback.
Okay. And why did we not email the link out to the survey to all the stakeholders?
We were trying to, I guess, work through our advisory groups, and that means, so perhaps that's a change we can make for next year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your work, Ron. Yes, ma'am.
Related to that, I think last year you had 1,000 and this year you had 400.
But of the 400, we don't know how many people
Right,
just
but my point is
turned in an
it
empty
the
survey.
same, did you do it last year? I mean, are we comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges? Last year, we didn't do the group kind of.
Well, the 400 that we have is as of today. The 1,000 was
Right,
by the
it's
time we were
YTD.
done.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand that. But I'm just saying, last year, did you have groups getting together doing the survey? So that's the same.
The
So
process is relatively the same,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodi. My next question is on slide number 13 on the early literacy. That seems to be a very strong focus of the board, that we want to really work together to accomplish increased literacy rates for students by the end of third grade, because all the data shows that that's very, very important. And that, you know, you talked about the 2.5 resource teacher positions and what they've done, and that was some phenomenal work. But we never received any data or information on how did we do this year across the board in all the elementary schools, and how are we measuring literacy rates by grade level?
Right, and that's what we just have taken note. Dr. Evans was asking that as well.
Right,
So
but
we will
I think
follow.
that piece of information is so fundamental to any board presentation on how we're doing towards achieving literacy in our K3 groups.
Let me put that in context of the effort that we made last year when we said students are more than a test score. We're no longer collecting district assessments. That was our partnership with SDEA, actually looking at meaningful assessment as closest to the child. So what we collect, what we'll put together for you is a list of all of the metrics, and some of them aren't available. There's different timelines, so we'll give you a calendar of what's available
so-
and when.
So how do we know that 92%, there was a 92% impact? How did we measure that?
So, just to reiterate, we counted the number of strategies children deployed in the active independent reading. We simply counted, and we looked,
Right.
we measured the growth over time.
Right.
And all
is
of the
this-
data that's
hold on, just
connected-
excuse me, Superintendent Martin. So is this measurement or assessment model replicated in all K3 classrooms across the district?
The assessment has been somewhat decentralized. We would certainly nudge this as a replicable model and the right way to measure student growth.
Okay, so.
And we've developed a number of Rely modules that support teachers in doing just what we are
I
talking
think I
about.
can clarify where the
Okay.
metrics are that
All right.
you're looking for.
Yes, ma'am.
They're metrics to go with every single LCAP goal. You can't have an LCAP goal and spend your dollars without having a metric attached to it. Those metrics are reported in July when we're finished with the school year. So it's actually part of my evaluation at the end of the year. So every single metric that you're asking for, Mr. Beiser, is across the whole system. You will get those in July, and we'll give you a timeline of which data points are available when.
Okay, good.
It's not just part of the June workshop, it's forecasting next year. The end of the 16-17 school year, what we accomplished this year, gets reported at the end of the year when the school year's done, and you'll see metrics across every single LCAP goal.
Right, and just for point of clarification, my query is not asking for the results of one test score. My query is focused on the overall assessment of students' literacy growth and grade level proficiency rates. And that we all, as educators in the room, a majority of the board are teachers or retired teachers, understand that however we assess students, it's important that we do that, and that it's not necessarily a test score. There's lots of ways to assess a student's proficiency levels, and that we know that. And so we're not looking for one score on one test. What we're looking for is, what is the metric? What is the assessment that all of our educators are using system-wide, so that we can understand, I think, what Dr. Evans was asking about, what is kind of like, how are we doing? What's our on-track, are we headed towards 100% literacy by the third grade? Are we currently, I mean, when Chesterton presented, he demonstrated that he was, I believe, at a 62% proficiency rate for his EL students. And so I thought that was pretty notable. One other question. Yeah.
We're getting a message from this. They need to change the memory card on the camera, so they want you to pause
Okay.
30 seconds to change the card.
Sure. Well, at that, let's go ahead and take a 3-minute break, and then we can begin LCAP goal number 2. Thank you.